At the exact moment Jim Caviezel finished filming the last scene of The Passion of the Christ, something extraordinary happened that forever changed not only the actor's life, but that of the entire cast present that day. For the first time in 20 years, the main actors of Mel Gibson's film decide to speak openly about the supernatural experiences they lived through during filming. What they reveal defies all scientific explanation and shows that those were not just normal movie recordings. During all these years, a curtain of silence protected the deepest secrets of the filming. Jim Caviezel, Maya Morgenstern and other cast members kept private accounts of events they witnessed, but which seemed impossible to explain. Now, with the proximity of the sequel's release, they finally decided to break that silence. The revelations are disturbing and show that something far beyond cinema happened during those months in Italy. The first signs that something different was happening emerged right from the beginning of filming. Maya Morgenstern, the Romanian actress who played Mary, Mother of Jesus, was the first to notice strange changes around her. On her first day of recording, she says she felt a nearby presence that she couldn't explain. During breaks, she found herself spontaneously praying, something she hadn't done for years. It was as if someone invisible was guiding me to those moments of prayer, she revealed in a recent interview. I was never a very religious person, but there's something was calling me to a path I didn't know. What most impressed Morgenstern was that these spiritual experiences were not limited to the filming set. She reported that when she returned to her hotel at night, she felt a deep peace she had never experienced before. Her dreams changed completely during the filming period. I dreamed of scenes that weren't in the script, but that seemed too real to be just dreams, confessed the actress. They were visions of Mary, the real Mary, teaching me how I should interpret each emotion, each moment of pain and hope. The most dramatic transformation occurred with Monica Bellucci, who played Mary Magdalene. The Italian actress, known for her roles in films like Matrix and other Hollywood successes, had never shown particular interest in religious themes. However, during the filming of The Passion of the Christ, she went through an experience she described as a complete spiritual awakening. Bellucci tells that on the third day of recording, while rehearsing a scene where Magdalene kneels at the foot of the cross, she felt something she would never forget. It was as if an invisible force descended upon me at that moment. Bellucci related in an intimate conversation with close friends, which was later revealed by a journalist present. My tears were no longer acting. It was a real, deep emotion that came from a place in me that I didn't know existed. I felt as if I were really living that historical moment, as if 2,000 years had disappeared and I was there, really there, witnessing that scene. These accounts show that the film The Passion of the Christ was much more than a common cinematographic production. For the actors involved, it became a transformative experience that connected their lives with historical events in a way that defies all logical understanding. The changes they experienced during filming continued to influence their lives long after the cameras stopped rolling. If these revelations awakened your curiosity about divine manifestations in our time, remember that our free ebook, The Secret of Jesus' Apparitions, offers unique teachings on how to recognize the sacred presence in our lives. The last copies are available in the pinned comment. What happened after the end of filming surprised even Mel Gibson himself. One by one, the main actors of The Passion of the Christ began to go through profound religious conversions that completely transformed their lives. These changes were so remarkable that some Hollywood executives tried to minimize or even hide these accounts, fearing they could affect the secular image of the film industry. Jim Caviezel was the first to experience a radical transformation. The actor, who was already a practicing Catholic before the film, reported that his faith deepened in ways he never imagined possible. It was no longer just believing, Caviezel explained at a religious conference years later. It was as if I had met Jesus personally during those months of filming. Each scene I played left a permanent mark on my soul. Caviezel's conversion manifested practically in his life. He began dedicating daily hours to prayer and meditation, something he had only done occasionally before. His wife noticed profound changes in his behavior. Jim returned from filming as a different person, she revealed in a rare interview. He had an inner peace that I had never seen before. It was as if something divine had touched his life permanently. Even more impressive was the impact on Caviezel's career. Mel Gibson had warned that playing Jesus would harm his opportunities in Hollywood, and that really happened. However, the actor embraced this consequence as part of his spiritual calling. "We all have our crosses to carry," said Caviezel, repeating the words he spoke to Gibson when he accepted the role. "If the price for playing Christ was the end of my career in Hollywood, then it was a price worth paying." Maya Morgenstern went through an even more dramatic transformation. The Romanian actress, who came from a family with little religious tradition, discovered during filming a spiritual connection that changed her entire life perspective. "Before the film, I saw religion as something distant, almost folkloric," confessed Morgenstern in an interview for a Christian magazine in Romania. "But when I began playing Mary, I felt as if I were being introduced to a spiritual reality that I didn't even know existed." Morgenstern's conversion was gradual, but profound. During filming, she began spontaneously waking up in the early morning hours to pray, something she had never done in her life. "It was as if someone was calling me to those moments of prayer," she explained. "I didn't understand what was happening, but I felt it was important to respond to that call." After the film ended, Morgenstern continued to deepen her spiritual life. She began attending an Orthodox church in Bucharest and later became one of the most respected voices on spirituality in Romanian cinema. "The film didn't just change my career," she said years later. "It changed my soul. I discovered that there exists a spiritual world much more real and present than I ever imagined." Luca Lionello, who played Judas, experienced a particularly intense conversion. The Italian actor reported that the guilt he felt during Judas's interpretation led him to a deep reflection on forgiveness and repentance. "I began to understand that we are all capable of betraying what we love," said Lionello in an interview for an Italian Catholic magazine. "But I also discovered that there is always a possibility of redemption, even for those who commit the worst mistakes." After the film, Luca became a regular attendee of the Catholic Church and later began giving lectures on how art can be a path to spiritual discovery. "My experience playing Judas taught me about divine mercy," he explained. "I discovered that no matter how lost we may be, there is always a way back home." These conversions were not limited to the main actors. Several members of the technical crew also reported transformative spiritual experiences during filming. Cinematographers, makeup artists, and production assistants described changes in their lives that they attributed directly to the time they spent working on the film. "If you need to learn to listen when our Lord is telling us something, if you need to learn to interpret a divine sign coming from God, remember that our free ebook, The Secret of Jesus Apparitions, offers unique teachings on how to recognize the sacred presence in our lives. The last copies are available in the pinned comment." A cinematographer, who preferred to remain anonymous, reported that during one of the crucifixion scenes, he felt such a strong spiritual presence that he began crying behind the camera. "I was just doing my job, focusing on the images through the lens," he said. "But suddenly I felt as if I were witnessing something real, not just a representation. It was a moment that changed my view of faith forever." These transformations were so remarkable that some Hollywood executives began to worry about the impact they could have on the industry's secular image. There were subtle attempts to minimize or even silence these accounts. fearing they could create an expectation that religious films should always lead to spiritual conversions. However, the actors involved were not intimidated by these pressures. They continued to speak openly about their experiences, seeing them as an important part of their personal testimony. "What we lived during those filmings was too real to be hidden," said one of the main actors. "If our experience can inspire other people to seek a deeper spiritual life, then we have the responsibility to share it." In addition to spiritual conversions, the actors of The Passion of the Christ reported a series of supernatural phenomena that occurred during filming and continued to affect their lives years later. These events, kept secret for almost 2 decades, began to be revealed only recently when the actors themselves decided to break the silence about experiences that defy any scientific explanation. The first inexplicable phenomenon occurred with Jim Caviezel during the filming of the Sermon on the Mount scene. The actor reported that moments before being struck by the lightning that became famous, he had a clear premonition of what was about to happen. 5 seconds before the lightning struck, I knew exactly what was going to happen, revealed Caviezel in an interview for a Catholic news agency. It was as if an inner voice was preparing me for that moment. It wasn't just luck or coincidence. Even more impressive was what Caviezel experienced during the moment of impact. "When the lightning struck me for an instant, I felt complete peace," described the actor. "It was as if I were being protected by something greater than me. The doctors said it should have been much worse, but I knew that some divine force was taking care of me." The actor had to undergo 2 heart surgeries after the incident, but always maintained that he felt blessed, not cursed, by the experience. Maya Morgenstern reported even more disturbing phenomena. During several nights of filming, she would wake up exactly at 3 in the morning with extremely vivid visions of biblical scenes that were not in the film's script. "They were like dreams, but much more real," explained the actress. "I saw Mary, the real Mary, living moments of her life that are not described in the Gospels. These visions were so clear that I could remember every detail when I woke up." The most extraordinary thing in Morgenstern's accounts was that many of the details she saw in these visions were later confirmed by biblical scholars as being consistent with ancient Christian traditions that she had never studied. "I saw clothes, customs, landscapes, everything with a historical precision that I had no knowledge to imagine," she said. "It was as if I were receiving information from a source that was beyond my personal knowledge." Monica Bellucci experienced phenomena related to inexplicable healings. During one of the most intense filmings, the actress developed a severe migraine that prevented her from continuing to work. "The pain was unbearable," reported Bellucci. "The set doctors couldn't relieve the suffering with normal medications." It was then that something happened that she described as miraculous. "I was lying in my trailer with unbearable pain when suddenly I felt as if invisible hands touched my head," Bellucci told in an intimate conversation that was later revealed. "The pain disappeared completely in a matter of seconds. It wasn't gradual relief. It was instantaneous and total." The actress immediately returned to the set and managed to complete her scenes without any discomfort. Francesco De Vito reported experiences with inexplicable temperature changes during filming. "On several occasions, when we were recording the most emotional scenes, the temperature around me changed drastically," explained the actor. "It wasn't normal weather. It was as if the air around me became warmer or colder according to the emotional intensity of the scene." The most striking phenomenon reported by De Vito occurred during the filming of Peter's denial scene. "At the exact moment when I denied knowing Jesus in the script, I felt a penetrating cold that began in my chest and spread throughout my body," he described. "It was as if I could physically feel the emotional pain that Peter must have experienced at that historical moment." Luca Lionello, who played Judas, experienced phenomena related to spiritual presences. Throughout the production, he reported feeling as if he were being watched by invisible forces. "It wasn't paranoia or imagination," insisted Lionello. "It was a real physical sensation that there were presences around me that I couldn't see, but could definitely feel." The most disturbing event for Lionello occurred the night after filming the betrayal scene. "I woke up in the middle of the night, feeling a crushing weight of guilt that wasn't mine," reported the actor. "It was as if I were carrying Judas's real guilt. It took me weeks to completely free myself from that sensation. It was as if I had absorbed part of the historical character's emotional experience." Several members of the technical crew also reported inexplicable phenomena. One of the main cinematographers told that during one of the crucifixion filmings, his cameras captured lights that had no identifiable source. "There were points of light moving in the background of scenes that we couldn't explain," he said. "We checked all the lighting equipment, but found no source for those lights." A member of the sound crew reported recordings of whispers and voices that didn't correspond to any person present on set. "We found several recordings with voices we couldn't identify," explained the technician. "They were clearly human voices, but no one on the crew recognized them. Some seemed to be speaking in Aramaic or ancient Hebrew." The makeup artists also had strange experiences. "There were days when Jim Caviezel's makeup process seemed to be guided by something beyond our technique," revealed one of the main makeup artists. "It was as if we instinctively knew how to make each wound, each mark, even when it wasn't specified in the script. Our hands simply moved in the right way." These phenomena were not limited to the filming period. Several actors reported that similar experiences continued to occur in their personal lives after the production ended. "It was as if something had been awakened in our lives that could no longer be turned off," explained one of the actors. "The phenomena were rarer, but still occasionally happened." Jim Caviezel confirmed that sporadic supernatural experiences continued to occur in his life years after the film. "During prayers or moments of deep meditation, sometimes I feel the same presence I experienced during filming," he revealed. "It's as if that spiritual connection that was established during the film had become a permanent part of my spiritual life." These accounts raise profound questions about the nature of reality and about how certain artistic projects can open doors to experiences that transcend the physical world. For the actors involved, these phenomena became part of their personal testimony about the existence of spiritual dimensions of reality that normally remain hidden. What few know is that Mel Gibson and the film's main actors made a pact of silence about the most extraordinary experiences they lived during filming. This agreement was not motivated by shame or doubt, but by a deep respect for the sacred nature of what they had witnessed. Now, 20 years later, they finally reveal why they kept these secrets and what was the real price they paid for that silence. Jim Caviezel was the first to suffer the professional consequences of his participation in the film. Exactly as Mel Gibson had predicted, his career in Hollywood practically ended after the release of The Passion of the Christ. "Mel told me I would never be able to work in this town again. And he was right," confirmed Caviezel in a recent interview. "But what he didn't tell me, and what I discovered alone, was that the silence about our experiences would be even harder to bear than the end of my career." For years, Caviezel struggled with the weight of not being able to publicly share the transformative experiences he had lived. Imagine carrying memories of events that changed your life forever, but not being able to talk about them because people simply wouldn't believe, explained the actor. "It was like carrying a treasure that you can't show to anyone." The pressure of silence deeply affected the mental health of several actors. Maya Morgenstern reported that she went through periods of depression in the years following the film. Not because of the experience itself, but because of the impossibility of publicly processing what she had lived. When you have deep spiritual experiences, you need to be able to talk about them to understand them completely, she said. The forced silence made me question whether what I had lived was real or just a product of my imagination. Luca Lionello was perhaps the most affected by the weight of silence. His experience playing Judas had been particularly intense, and not being able to share the emotional guilt he carried led him to seek professional help. I started therapy but couldn't tell the therapist the real origin of my feelings, revealed Lionello. It was like trying to solve a puzzle with half the pieces hidden. The Pact of Silence also created a special bond between the main actors. They became a kind of secret society, united by the shared experience and the impossibility of talking about it publicly. We developed our own language, a way of communicating about our experiences without really talking about them, explained one of the actors. It was comforting to know I wasn't alone, that others had lived similar things. This bond manifested in occasional private meetings over the years. The actors would meet informally to share how their lives had been affected by the film experience. These meetings were like group therapy sessions, said one participant. Finally, we could speak freely about what we had lived, without fear of judgment or disbelief. Mel Gibson also suffered under the weight of silence, but for different reasons. As director, he felt responsible for protecting his actors from the consequences of public revelations about supernatural experiences. I knew that if these stories became public prematurely, they would be ridiculed or labeled as fanatics, explained Gibson. My responsibility was to protect them, even if it meant carrying the weight of silence. The director also faced pressures from the film industry to minimize any discussion about supernatural aspects of filming. There was constant pressure to keep the focus on the technical and artistic aspects of the film, avoiding any mention of spiritual experiences, revealed Gibson. It was as if Hollywood was afraid that admitting supernatural experiences could threaten its secular credibility. The breaking of silence began gradually. Jim Caviezel was the first to begin speaking more openly about his experiences, initially at small religious conferences. I realized I was depriving other people of stories that could inspire their own spiritual journeys, said the actor. The silence I thought was protecting the experience was actually limiting its positive impact. The decision to completely break the silence came with the announcement of the film's sequel. We realized that if we were going to make a continuation, people deserved to know the complete truth about what happened during the original filmings, explained Gibson. We couldn't ask the audience to emotionally invest in a new story without being honest about the depth of the first experience. The process of breaking the silence has been liberating, but also challenging. For 20 years, these experiences were ours, only ours, said Maya Morgenstern. Sharing them with the world means giving up something very personal and sacred, but it also means allowing other people to be touched by these stories. The public's reaction to the first revelations has been mixed, but predominantly positive. Some people question our sanity or accuse us of religious marketing, admitted one of the actors. But most reactions have been of gratitude for our honesty and inspiration from the stories we're sharing. The actors now speak about silence as a necessary phase of their spiritual journeys. Maybe we needed those 20 years of silence to really understand what we had lived, reflected Francesco De Vito. Now that we are more spiritually mature, we can share these experiences in a wiser and more balanced way. The decision to break the silence was also motivated by a sense of spiritual responsibility. If these experiences were gifts from God, then hiding them would be like burying talents, said Jim Caviezel, referring to the biblical parable. The time has come to share these treasures with the world, regardless of personal consequences. 20 years later, the true legacy of the Passion of the Christ can finally be understood in its entirety. It's not just about a film that grossed over $600 million worldwide or caused controversy among critics. The real legacy lies in the transformed lives, in the supernatural experiences that continue to influence people around the world, and in the courage of the actors to finally share the complete truth about what they lived. Jim Caviezel, now 56 years old, reflects on how his life was divided into two parts, before and after playing Jesus Christ. "I'm not the same person I was before those filmings," admits the actor. "And I'm not just talking about my career or my fame. I'm talking about my soul, my understanding of life, my purpose in the world. Everything changed in a way I'm still discovering." The decision to return for the sequel, The Passion of the Christ Resurrection, was not easy for Caviezel. "When Mel approached me about making the continuation, my first reaction was fear," confesses the actor. "I knew that reliving this experience could bring back all those intense sensations that took me years to process. But I also knew I had the responsibility to complete the story. For the sequel, which will begin filming in 2025, Caviezel will need to be digitally rejuvenated to appear 33 years old again. It's surreal to think they'll use technology to make me look the age Jesus was when he died," says the actor. "But maybe it's appropriate that resurrection, both in the film and in real life, requires a transformation that goes beyond what is naturally possible." Maya Morgenstern, who will also return as Mary in the sequel, sees her participation in the new film as an opportunity to close a spiritual cycle. "During these 20 years, I carried the memories of that experience like a mother carries the memories of a child," explains the actress. "Now playing Mary again will be like reuniting with a part of me that remained asleep all this time." The Romanian actress also reveals that her spiritual experiences didn't end with the original film. "Throughout these years, I occasionally still have dreams or moments of prayer where I feel the same presence I experienced during filming," tells Morgenstern. "It's as if that spiritual connection had become a permanent part of my life." Francesco De Vito, who will return as Peter, sees the sequel as an opportunity to explore themes of redemption that always fascinated him. "Peter is a character who deeply understands what it means to fail and be forgiven," says the actor. "After all these years processing my own experience of playing Peter, I think I'm finally ready to explore his complete journey." Mel Gibson, now over 65 years old, approaches the sequel with a different perspective than he had 20 years ago. "When I made the first film, I was trying to tell the story of Christ's passion," explains the director. "Now, with the sequel, I'm trying to tell the story of hope. And having lived these 2 decades, processing what happened during the original filmings, I think I'm better prepared for this responsibility." The director also admits that the supernatural experiences from the original filmings deeply influenced his approach to the sequel. "I can't pretend those experiences didn't happen," says Gibson. "They became part of the film's story, and it would be dishonest of me to ignore them when making the continuation. If God chose to manifest his presence during the original filmings, then I need to be open to that happening again." The lasting impact of the original film continues to manifest in surprising ways. Several people around the world have reported profound spiritual experiences while watching the film, and many of these experiences mirror what the actors lived during filming. "I constantly receive letters and messages from people who say they had conversion or healing experiences while watching the film," reveals Caviezel. "It's as if what we lived during filming had been somehow captured on film and transmitted to viewers." A pastor from a church in the Brazilian interior wrote to Caviezel, telling that several people from his congregation reported vivid dreams with Jesus after watching the film. They described specific details about Jesus' appearance and voice that were exactly consistent with my experience during filming, said the actor. "It was as if the same spirit that touched us during production was reaching people through the screen." Doctors have also reported inexplicable cases related to the film. An oncologist from São Paulo documented the case of a patient with terminal cancer who experienced complete remission after watching The Passion of the Christ during her treatment. "I can't scientifically explain what happened," said the doctor, "but the transformation was as dramatic as it was inexplicable. The transformation stories are not limited to health issues. Marriage counselors have reported cases of couples on the verge of divorce who found reconciliation after watching the film together. Prison chaplains have documented extraordinary conversions among inmates who watched the film. Teachers have reported behavior changes in problematic students after showing film excerpts in history or religion classes. It's as if the film had a life of its own," observes Gibson. "We did the best we could to tell the story with integrity and respect, but what happened afterward, the spiritual impact the film had on people, that's far beyond what any director or actor could control or plan. The actors now see their responsibility in a broader way. We're not just actors who played biblical characters," says Morgenstern. "Somehow we became guardians of a spiritual experience that belongs to all humanity. This is both an honor and an enormous weight." The upcoming sequel, scheduled for 2026, will be filmed with a different awareness of the spiritual power that may be involved. This time, we won't be caught by surprise if supernatural experiences happen, says Gibson. We'll be prepared, respectful, but also open to what God wants to do through this project. Jim Caviezel ends his reflections with a perspective that summarizes the true meaning of his journey. "I spent 20 years trying to understand if I deserved to have lived those experiences during filming. Now, I realize I was asking the wrong question. The real question isn't whether I deserved to live that, but what God wants me to do with what I lived." For everyone involved, the story of the Passion of the Christ is far from over. The actors broke their silence not just to share their past experiences, but to prepare the world for what may be coming. If the first journey was about Christ's passion and death, says Caviezel, then the next will be about his victory over death. And if God chooses to manifest himself again through our work, we'll be ready to be his instruments. The experiences these actors lived and finally shared with us remind us that there are mysteries in this world that go far beyond our understanding. They invite us to remain open to the supernatural, to the possibility that the divine still manifests in our lives in ways that defy our logic, but deeply touch our soul. As the Apostle Paul said, "Now we see as in a mirror, dimly, but then we shall see face to face." Perhaps that is the true message behind all these experiences. An invitation to look beyond the veil that separates the physical world from the spiritual, and discover that the sacred is much closer to us than we ever imagined.